What makes somebody not care about what the teacher wants them to do if they believe there is a better use of their time? Whereas something like learning how to write or learning design or learning programming, basically any job you go into, that's going to be useful.
How does a person answer why something happens?
When you look at the findings in different fields,
scant is the part of life in which we live.
To attain the highest values,
you have to help people become very comfortable with uncertainty and not having the map. I don't really know, like, I don't have a good answer for how to do it. Like, I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
Because I see so many people unhappy with the map, but then also afraid to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you build that comfort?
Yeah. So let me throw something out at you. This idea of something I've been playing around with recently, and then I heard it listening back to your interview with the founder of Minerva Schools. They talk about like their program is very much like the first small part of it is push, and then there's a pull element. The push element is a bunch of programs designed to expose you to 4 core competencies. So they have identified these foundational things, almost like it goes back to the semantic tree, right? It gives people that something to hang on the branches, to hang their ideas, their reflections on these branches or the trunk of that. And theirs was critical thinking, creative thinking, effective communication, effective interaction. Right? So everything kind of is some remix of those 4 core competencies. And then the whole far transfer thing is enhanced because it's all like new, you're exposed to it in new contexts all the time. So eventually you develop your own ability to take those 4 foundational things and apply them to any new context, which I think is just genius. And then they have this pull element where the students basically get to decide what they want to do as like a final, like as their senior year sort of curriculum. And then the school matches them with people who can do that, or even brings people from outside to do that. And it seems to me that there's a clue in there to training for genius, because you're giving people the skills to be able to then self-direct their learning, and then also giving them a little bit of a guardrails and you know the support mechanisms to then construct that learning and actually go and do it.
It's tough without knowing how it works in practice, right? Like, I think that the like go study your own thing and like find a thing that you're interested in is probably like the best way to introduce it from within an educational system. But that is still, you're still sort of on the map, right? Because you haven't chosen to go explore that thing. You've been told to go explore something, and then you're going out and exploring it, right? What I'd be more interested in training is what makes somebody not care about what the teacher wants them to do if they believe there is a better use of their time. Like, what trains that independence? Because even in the Minerva example, you're still doing what you're told to do. Like, you're not choosing to go study this thing and then making these connections and pulling in all the resources. It's like a very nerfed up version of the real world, right? So how do we enable students to not even need the Minerva teacher? Like, how do we even dispense with the idea of students? How do you give someone the confidence to choose something they are interested in and go pursue it and find their own teachers? Not for any kind of grade or degree, but because of their deep interest and fascination with the topic.
The curriculum you did at CMU was sort of psychology and philosophy based, which are sort of very foundational skills. You weren't practicing a trade or learning a trade at that time. You mentioned how like the psychology taught you a lot about behavioral marketing, philosophy, about analytical writing. Can you speak a little bit more about that idea of far transfer of skills?
Yeah, I think that, you know, one, there's always going to be a little bit of like narrative fallacy here, right? Like, I'd love to say that studying, so I was a philosophy major. I started as a business major in the business school. I dropped out after freshman year because I was like, okay, these classes suck and all these people end up in miserable jobs. Like, why would I do this? So I'm going to study philosophy instead. But also part of that was the philosophy program was way easier, like so much easier. And one, I enjoyed the classes, right? They were fun to me. And so that helped, but also it was just like much lower major requirements, much easier classes, like lower expectations, which meant I could spend more time playing video games. So it's like, I would love to say that, oh, it was this like strategic thing. And I realized it would be so helpful for like marketing and entrepreneurship, but it wasn't that, right? Like it did end up being helpful later for a couple of reasons. One, the philosophy actually translated very well into content marketing, right? Because pretty much everything that I did for sophomore, and then I kind of like dropped out for junior year and then came back senior. So like for the other 2 years that I was in college, I was pretty much just writing essays and getting feedback on them and like structuring arguments, which obviously translates very well to being like a content marketer, online think boy, whatever. So like that part was super useful. And a lot of the psychology stuff was like kind of useful too for marketing, but I also don't think that you like necessarily need it, right? I mean, it would have been more useful to have just completely dropped out of college and started doing marketing and writing and getting stuff out there than to have like spent 3 more years in that system, I think. So I made the most of it. But the skill transfer thing is very interesting because I think that one thing a lot of young people overlook is the broad usefulness of what they're studying and learning. So like I was in a professional fraternity in college, and we put a lot of emphasis on teaching kids like these bullshit professional skills. So like how to make a really good resume, how to make a nice like
networking
deck, right? Like how to properly dress for professional events, like all of that stuff. And those are like completely useless skills unless you're playing that very narrow game. Whereas something like learning how to write or learning design or learning programming, like basically any job you go into, that's going to be useful.